Nikon released the firmware version 5.0 for the Nikon Z9 on March 13th, 2024. Within it lie many major updates that you'll want to be aware of if you're a Nikon Z9 owner. I've spent my time since the release digesting the reference guide supplement in order to walk you through the updates. So let's jump in first with the photography updates. The first one listed is a rich tone portrait mode. What this is a update to the normal portrait mode that was already a feature, but this one produces an image that's more vivid and also prevents highlights from being blown out. The next update listed is that you now have a continuous 15 mode, as to where originally you just had a continuous 30, 60, and 120. For this setting, you can shoot from 1/32,000th of a second all the way up to 1/60th of a second. And you can now shoot in a crop frame mode. And for this, your image size will be large. And it should also be noted that the pre-release capture mode is also available. The next new setting to be aware of is a image quality setting. For this one, they've changed the name of image quality to image quality settings. And you now have two options to choose from. Those are image quality and image quality HSFC. Continuing on with the settings, they've now added a high ISO noise reduction mode. And within that, you can choose between a type A and a type B mode. The next setting has been added to both the photography and the video modes. And that one is skin softening, where you now have a high, normal, low, and off setting to choose from. Additionally, it should be noted that this cannot be used with high-speed frame capture plus, multiple exposures, or with an HDR overlay setting. And there are also restrictions when using the raw video file types and also in-log. The next setting is the portrait impression mode. This is a new setting added to both the photography and the video settings. And this one allows you to fine-tune both your hue and your brightness using 3 different modes that you can set. To set this one, you'll go into your photo settings, you'll select portrait impression balance, and then you'll see that you've got 3 different options here. And to set one, you would go and click the right button, and that'll bring you over into this setting where you can now adjust your hue and your brightness. The next new feature that's been added is a high frequency flicker reduction setting. So what this will do is it allows you to configure the frequency so that you can make sure that you don't get flickering based on the light source that you're using. So there's 4 settings that come as a default. So if you want to go add this to one of your function buttons, what you do is you go to the F2 custom controls menu and you'll select high frequency flicker reduction. That will then allow you to use one of the buttons on your camera to toggle this feature on and off. Once you have the feature toggled on or off using one of your buttons, you can then use the subcommand dial to switch between one of the 4 settings that are defaulted to the profiles. If none of those options are working, you can then press the display button that will allow you to use your control pad to change the value of the frequency to get a frequency value that works for your lighting setup. You can also go adjust the 4 presets through the high frequency flicker reduction setting. That can be found in the photo settings menu. The next couple of settings are all going to revolve around auto capture, and these are going to be applicable to both photo and video modes. So the first new change that's come to auto capture is you can now use manual focus mode to set up auto capture. So that's helpful if you know exactly where you want your focus point to be and you don't want it to change through an autofocus setting. The next change that's come to the auto capture is that you can now use a DX mode, also referred to as a crop sensor mode. Prior to this update, you could only use a full frame sensor mode. However, be aware that you can't use a 1:1 aspect ratio or a 16:9 ratio. As we talked about earlier in some of the photo settings, there is now a continuous 15 shooting mode that you can go into. So that mode's also become available in auto capture, as has the continuous 60 mode. The next couple of changes that have come to the auto capture are just solely related to the names that Nikon has chosen to use for the settings. So speed has now been referred to as slowest. The subject size has been replaced with smallest. On the distance criteria display, near is now referred to as nearest, and far is now referred to as farthest. Moving on to the advanced distance mode, the distances have now been updated to be 0.1 meters all the way up to 999 meters. And with respect to the subjects that you might shoot in auto capture, the airplane detection mode has now been added on the Z9 for auto capture. Next, when trying to activate your auto capture, there is now a set the start date and time setting that you can set. and you can tell the camera to stay on for either 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, or set no limit to it so that the camera will always stay on. And then finally, one feature that they've added is that when you're in auto capture mode, you'll now get a yellow box that surrounds the screen. So that's just to indicate to you that you're sitting in auto capture mode. However, when you actually capture an image or a video, that yellow box will turn to red. Moving on from auto capture, as far as features go for photography, if you have a ProPhoto A10, you can now utilize the LEDs on it in order to use the autofocus illuminator. To activate this, you use custom setting A12, and there's a setting called built-in autofocus illuminator. So that can be really helpful when you're in a dark environment and you need light to help your camera autofocus. And the last item to highlight with respect to videography is the changes that were made to the high-res zoom mode. So with this one, there's now a new color for the in-focus display, and that is that they've changed that color from red to green. And remember, this only applies whenever the high-res zoom option is turned to on. So at this point, if you're enjoying this video, I'd really appreciate it if you'd smash the like button down below. And also, if you want to see more Nikon updates as they come out and other photography related videos, please be sure to hit the subscribe button down below so that you can be the first one to know whenever my new videos get uploaded. So with that, let's move on to the updates that have been made to the playback options. So the first one to talk about here is when you have a video and you go into playback mode, you now have an option to select either quarter speed, half speed, or stay at the original frame rate. So this can be really useful if you just want to take a quick glance at your video, but you don't want to have to sit there and watch the entire video in its full length. The way you get to that is when you have a video sitting in playback, you hit the I button and then scroll down to the bottom and you'll see the playback speed options. However, if you do a lot of video shooting, you can add this to a custom control to the subcommand dial, so that'll allow you, whenever you're watching a video in playback, to just flip over to the speed that you want instantly. Another tip just to know on this part, if you assign that playback speed using the I menu, that setting will stick for all of the other videos that are in your playback. But if you do it through the subcommand dial, it will only latch onto the one video that you're watching. Another update that's been made to playback is under the retouch option. There's now a customized retouch options available, and this allows you to go through and make multiple selections based on how you would like the images to be retouched. And again, you get to this by selecting the I button whenever you're looking at an image. The third item that's been added is an auto series playback option into your series playback settings. For this one, you can go into your auto series playback options on the camera. When that playback is on, you can set a wait before playback time of either long, normal, or short. And that occurs once the first picture in the series is displayed. And then you can set the auto series playback speed to be either 5 frames per second, 15, or 30, or at the release mode that is currently set. And the final option that's been added to playback is an auto image rotation setting. So this is something that you might be used to already on your phone. So think about if you take a photo in a portrait orientation and then rotate your camera back down to a landscape orientation. When you're looking on the playback, usually you just see a much smaller image with black bars on both sides. But now having auto image rotation, you'll be able to rotate to see that image in its full size. To get to this, there's a playback setting within the camera called auto image rotation that you can toggle on or off. So let's move on into the next section. This is going to be over the changes that have come to the controls. The first one that people might be excited about is that you can now have separate shooting modes that are configurable for both photo and video. So to do this, you turn the extended menu banks on in either the photo shooting menu or the video shooting menu, and now you can have separate shooting modes for both photo and video mode. The next item to talk about is that you can now adjust the focus border width. And the way that you do this is you go into A11, go into the focus point display setting, and in there you'll find another setting called focus point border width. You can now adjust this to between a 1 and a 3 based on your preference so that it makes it easier for you to see where your focus box is. The next custom control setting that's been added is A14, and this is the max aperture level during manual focus. So how this is going to work is if you have this setting turned on, whenever you're in manual focus, your lens is automatically going to go to its maximum aperture for displaying whenever you're not actually shooting. However, whenever you press the shutter release button, the lens will go to the aperture that you have set. So this is just really helpful for getting more light into your sensor whenever you're trying to preview a photo. A few things to note though, this could cause your frame rate to drop. It could also delay your shooting by a very tiny amount. And it should also be noted though, if you're in autofocus mode and you spin the focus ring, that's not going to trigger this event to happen. The next item to talk about is the new function that's at D19 and G17 within the custom controls. And that's going to be that a half press on your shutter release will cancel any zoom that you have during the preview mode while you're in manual focus. So if you have half press to cancel zoom MF, that option turned on in your camera, if you are setting up for a shot and you're using the magnifying glasses to preview at a more zoomed in level, if you half press the shutter release button, that's going to back you out back to 100%. The next items apply to F1 and G1 within the custom settings, and this is new options to customize the eye menu on the back of your camera. You can now assign the skin softening, portrait impression balance, and auto capture to the customized eye menu. So this is just helpful for quickly getting to those settings if you need them. So the next item that's been added is the exposure compensation and white balance are now changeable during shooting function recall. In order to do this, you have to assign the custom shooting recall in the custom F2 buttons for the custom controls. Another feature that's been added is there are now new roles for the custom control shooting and the G2 custom controls. One of the really cool ones that I like is that you can cycle through your autofocus modes that you have set. So that's really useful when you're shooting in a dynamic scene and you need to quickly change between your autofocus settings. Additionally, you can now assign the skin softening mode as well as the portrait impression balance mode. So these are just more options that are quickly available at your fingertips. There are also new roles available for the custom control settings for F3, and these all deal with the custom control playback. So within this, you now have an exposure compensation button and an ISO sensitivity button. Additionally, there's an updated list of roles that are available to the buttons. So you now get raw processing for the current picture, raw processing for multiple pictures, trim, resize current picture, resize multiple pictures, delighting, straighten, distortion control, perspective control, monochrome, overlay add, lighten, darken, and motion blend. There's also new roles available for the main command dial and the sub command dial. These are going to be the frame advanced zoom position. So that allows you to choose how the camera centers the display when either the main or sub command dial is rotated. And there's also a playback zoom face selection. If this is selected and there's multiple faces detected in the picture during playback, the sub-command dial can be rotated to switch between the detected faces. Next up, there's been functions added to the main command dial, the sub-command dial for frame advance. There's an option now that's called upload it to FTP. So that's going to skip to the next or previous picture that's been uploaded to an FTP server. There's also an option for upload it to computer, so you can skip to the next or previous picture that has been uploaded to a computer. The next function that's been added is a main command dial and sub command dial for video playback. So you can also, as we've already talked about, use the sub command or main command dial to adjust your playback speed using the new settings that were added for half and quarter speed. And finally, for the controls, there's been changes in the way that you now format your memory card. To do this, you now go to your settings for format memory card, select the slot that you want to format, and you're going to press the trash can and format button to proceed when the options are displayed. So this is just giving you some additional fail-safes in making sure that you don't accidentally format a memory card. Moving on to the display settings that have changed, one of the features that I really like is that the shooting display maximum zoom is now 400%, as to where previously it was 200%. So for myself personally, I really like this for helping me to focus on stars, as this helps me see that the star has really gotten down to its smallest point whenever I'm trying to manually focus on one. So that's just one use case of this, and I'm sure there's plenty of others where this is helpful. And to do this, this is just like normal where you use the plus or minus magnifying glass on your LCD display whenever you're in live view and just trying to see what your image might look like. The final change that's been made to the display mode is that if you get a high temperature warning for your memory card, that used to actually show up kind of towards the middle left of your screen. but now it shows up across the very top over almost into the right corner, so it's out of your way and out of your view. The last grouping of updates are all going to be around the network settings. For these, I'm not going to go into extreme detail, but I'm going to at least highlight the 4 areas that updates have been made. So for these, the first one is a new smart device connection method using the Wi-Fi connection STA mode. So you'll want to read through the reference guide as it'll walk you through step by step how to connect to an existing network. The next item is a direct wireless connection to a smart device, so a Wi-Fi access point mode. This basically turns the camera into a wireless LAN access point. The second new item that's been added to the network settings is that the FTP port number is now specifiable in the FTP connection settings. So that's helpful when you have a specific number that you're assigned to. The third item added to the network settings is a new option for connect to FTP server in the network menu, and you upload in HEIF format. So there's a upload in HEIF format that's been added to the connect to FTP server in the options for the network menu. And within there, you can choose options for high compression, medium, or low, or just turn that off. And it should be noted that converted HEIF images are not stored on the memory card. And finally, for the network connections, if you're using an air glue accessory while the MC-N10 remote grip is connected, Bluetooth functions will now be available, as to where in previous versions they were disabled. So that covers everything for the network options. One last thing that I would recommend taking a look at out of the supplemental guide is the full list of the menu and default items for the new firmware. So that covers everything for the updates and changes that have been made to the Nikon Z9 following the firmware 5.0 release. Some of these are some exciting new features to get. I'll be honest, there's one that I'm a little surprised that they didn't add that just came out on the Z8, and that's the pixel shift shooting. However, I would expect that we'll still see this come at a later date for the Nikon Z9. Let me know down in the comments if you have any questions about the firmware update or just your general thoughts on what was released by Nikon. If you like this video, please be sure to smash the like button down below, and if you want to see more content like this in the future, please be sure to hit the subscribe button. As always, I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and I'll see you in the next one.